On Tuesday, Texas Governor Greg Abbott visited the Port of Houston. Abbott touted that the exports at the Port of Houston are increasing and it, quote, has an economic value of over $800 billion. Abbott is currently running for a third term as governor and has maintained a consistent lead over Democrat Beto O'Rourke.
So, Steve, why don't you start again?
Steve Kane, CEO of Kinder Morgan.
Glenn Wright, Senior Vice President of Renewables and Energy Solutions for Shell.
Edward Stones, Business Vice President, Energy and Climate for Dow.
Kerry Keeney, Chief Government and Public Relations Officer, Port Houston.
John Mosley, Chief Commercial Officer, Port Houston.
Roger Gunther, Executive Director, Port Houston.
Rick Campo, Chairman of Port Houston.
Jennifer Dunphy, the Director of Major Growth Ventures with ExxonMobil.
Adriana Cruz, Executive Director of the Texas Economic Development and Tourism Office in the Office of Governor Greg Abbott.
Matt Malloy, CEO of Targa Resources.
Thank you, and I really appreciate everybody coming today. We've had a robust discussion about how the Port of Houston is really important, and it's about partnerships with local government, with industry, with state government, and federal government. So, Governor Abbott, thank you for being here today, and we appreciate your stalwart support of the port and understanding how important it is to everyone in Texas. So thank you, and you have the floor.
Sure. Well, listen, thank you, Rick, and I want to thank everybody for being here today. Listen, the reason why we're here is because Texas is the national leader for economic development. And we know that this port is an essential component to that economic development. I wanted to be here to learn more about what their needs are, what the progress is, and what the status is. And I got to tell you, I was amazed to hear how it was even more successful than what I knew about. Generally, ports are vital to the economy in Texas. Texas has been the #1 state in the United States for exports for more than 17 years. And the Port of Houston has helped Texas be #1. Ports create thousands, probably tens of thousands, of good-paying jobs, especially for the people in this region. And they are key to the supply chain process. And ports can also help to solve international energy demand issues that we see arising more and more. Well, the Port of Houston is particularly busy. I was told today that the volume has increased 24% this year. I'm going to show you something. You may or may not be able to see this, but it's just one of the multitude of very impressive documents that I received today. The bar chart that goes up the most is the Port of Houston. It's in comparison to Los Angeles on the left, Savannah next to Houston here, and this is the total U.S. So you see that this port is growing far faster volume-wise than the nation as a whole or some of the other very important ports. This port is #1 for waterborne tonnage and #1 in ships. The Port of Houston has an economic value of more than $800 billion, and maximizing Port of Houston is crucial for Houston, for Texas, and candidly, for world economic development. Exports, as was explained to me here today, they're down in some other areas across the country, but they're increasing here. One of the many ways in which we're seeing an increase in port activity here is because shippers have decided to choose Houston over California, whether it be wait times in the water or wait times on dock and onshore. Businesses have realized it's far more efficient, effective, and at a lower cost for them to choose Texas as opposed to California for their importing into the United States activity. I'll add this, and that is Europe is learning the hard way. What happens when countries rely upon despots for their energy needs? To provide Americans and the world with reliable energy, the federal government needs to unleash the oil and gas sector in Texas as well as in the United States. That means increasing things like LNG exports. It means accelerating the permitting process and helping assist as opposed to punish production. A lot of that production that occurs, whether it be in the Permian Basin or the Eagle Ford Shale or other places in the state of Texas, it winds up right here. And from here, it'll go to parts across the entire globe. Well, the Texas energy sector is important to this port. I think about 80% of what comes in and goes out of here is connected one way or the other to the energy sector. And the energy sector is vital for the future of Texas. They provide hundreds of thousands of good-paying jobs to hardworking Texans who may be working out in the field or working on a dock. And those jobs help those families be able to buy a home or take care of their families. I say this in one particular context, and that is we live in a time when a lot of American families are frustrated about the rising cost because of inflation. Sometimes inflation like that can be caused by regulations. One of those regulatory efforts is underway as we speak right now with the Biden administration seeking to impose EPA-based regulations in the Permian Basin that could lead to one of two things. It could lead to a reduction in production or it could lead to an increase in cost of that production. Either way, it's going to lead to increased inflation of what you will be paying at the price of the pump. I'm working to fight back against those regulations so that it will not cause inflation, so that we will be able to continue to produce the energy that's needed, not just to power Texas and our economy, but also to power the world and its economy without stoking inflation. The Port of Houston and these many companies, some of whom are around this table right now, are a vital part of the Texas economic juggernaut. Texas has been ranked number one as the best state for doing business for 20 years in a row. Number one for the most economic development projects, some of which are hinged to the port region. We are number one for exports, as I pointed out earlier, for about 17 years in a row. And this past May, Texas became home to more headquarters for Fortune 500 companies than any other state in America. I mentioned a lot of large businesses right there. Very importantly, Texas also, about 90% of all of our businesses in Texas are small businesses. And we rank number one in the nation as the best state to start a small business. All of this leads to a lot of jobs. In the past 4 years, Texas has added far more jobs than any other state in the United States of America. And as we gather here today, more Texans are earning a paycheck than ever before in the history of our state. I'll mention something to you all here that we didn't talk about earlier, but there are byproducts to having such a robust economy. We are sitting on a budget surplus of $27 billion. Part of that money can help build out infrastructure at places like this port that could use part of that money to help build out the infrastructure. But what I want to do with at least half of that $27 billion surplus is return it to the people who provided it, and that is taxpayers, with the largest property tax cut in the history of our state. Bottom line, I want to say thanks again to the Houston port and to this entire region for all the businesses who do business here. Thank them for their hard work, for not only succeeding, but excelling even in these times. Especially, I love competition. I like beating our competitors, and we are beating our competitors in other states right now because of the efficiency and effectiveness of the Port of Houston. With that, we'll be happy to take a few questions.